Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming back at you live from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is 8:57 on a Wednesday morning. Beautiful day. The weather's been pretty spectacular. This midsummer season is always fun. It was probably about a week ago. I was looking outside of my window in my bathroom and I saw the first sign of fall with some of the leaves changing on my tree. It's like, wow, holy shit, it's here already. I love the fall, but I'm a summer person through and through. But anyway, we're getting closer to Halloween season. So about a month ago, I saw Halloween candy being displayed in certain stores. It's crazy, but anyway, for Halloween season, it's a big. It's my favorite holiday, and I usually always try to do something really fun on Halloween, and then I usually do some kind of special show here on Film Fanatic, in regards to Halloween, around some kind of movie or movies, obviously, and so that will be something that happens. But for me, it's like I watch horror movies all year round, so and I just kind of have that. I'm just kind of in that world all the time, so it's not really anything different for me. So, uh, but anyway, it feels really good to be able to start doing videos again. I wasn't able to do any videos for uh, well, since like Friday of last week, because I had gigs and I was busy with that, and then I had to do a bunch of training because school starts up this week. Tomorrow is the first day of school, which is just like fucking crazy. So I had to do a bunch of training for that CPR training, like online training, which took about 7 to 8 hours, and then I had to do a in-person training for which was about 4 hours. So I was kind of doing all that stuff. So anyway, I'm back. It's all done, and school is starting tomorrow, which is just crazy. And I just finished watching the last movie of the new movies I just bought at Bull Moose Music. I went to Bull Moose about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks ago. I went up to the Bull Moose Music in Waterville, and man, I was just again. I've talked about it before because I've covered quite a few of the movies, and I got two more shows coming to complete my all my new purchases. Today's part of that, and so I talked about just being almost kind of overwhelmed on how amazing it was. The way the sections are laid out now at the Bull Moose in Waterville. Each Bull Moose is very different. Now they have boutique labels have their own actual aisles, which was crazy. They had like a Severin section, they had an Arrow section. Um, yeah, it was wild. I've never seen. I mean, as far as a movie collector, and again, a lot of people buy. I mean, most people buy movies. I think like well, at least it seems like the guys that I watch on YouTube, for instance, Moods 616, who's just an amazing guy, one of my favorites. Covers all things exploitation, and then also 42nd Street Forever, which is a UK. He's a UK YouTube guy who is just he takes the deepest dive that I know as far as diving into the murky depths of exploitation. But for the most part, those guys get everything online. They do buy stuff here and there in person, but from what I gather, they pretty much get everything in line. I barely ever buy any movies online. When I first started getting really into collecting exploitation movies, which was probably about 5 years ago, when I started to really take a deep dive into like wanting to really build up my collection, I I did buy some movies online. I remember buying Blood Feast, Herschel Gordon Lewis's classic film, and then also my favorite slasher movie of all time, Maniac by Bill Luswig. And I think I bought one or two other ones online, but they were really expensive, and but amazing, amazing, amazing films. But I just don't like. I like the hunt. I like the hunt. I like going the tactile experience. Going through a bin and going through an aisle and seeking out things. So, um, going to Boo Moose, I had a show up in Waterville. It was the end of our the tour that I was on. It was the last date, and I went up to Boo Moose a little early, and I was just again I couldn't believe it was kind of almost overwhelming how many movies they had. So this is the second to last video to do a show on all the newer purchases that I bought. But I buy everything in person. So the other idea I'm toying around because I've gotten a lot of newer slasher movies. And again, slasher movies it's my favorite genre. So I'm thinking of doing like a second part or a part two of my favorite slasher movies of all time because I've gotten quite a few new ones. So I'm thinking about doing that pretty soon. So yeah, and then other things that have been going on. We had a couple of really fun quantum shows. Uh, 2 weeks ago, we had our show with my friend Ronnie. We played at Opera House Video, and that was super fun. We did those sets and that whole kind of setup in a kind of a different format where we basically set it up like a round robin thing where we were like playing 10 15 minutes on and off and just kind of playing off of each other and then playing with each other. And all of that stuff that we did for that show was pretty much all improvised. I did maybe one song, like quantum song that we have, but everything else was improvised. And Ronnie is so great. I've seen him play, and I really admire. I mean, he has a ton of material. His music is very much electronic. He's just an incredible musician, an amazing guitar player, and he does have songs and tunes. But I've seen him do 2 or 3 hour sets of where he's literally just improvising, and he builds a lot of his own instruments and all these things, and it's just wild. And I've always really admired that because, like with the quantum stuff, like there's always parts of our shows or things, in our sets of where we do kind of improvise a little bit, and sometimes we do it more than others. But for the most part, we kind of concentrate on just kind of playing our tunes and the way I kind of structure our songs. There's a lot of space for that if that's going to happen or not. But we never usually go into a set or a gig where we're just totally winging it. From the perspective of the audience, it might sound like it's improvised, but about 95% of it is all very, very much worked out. But doing the Opera House video show, it was all improvised. Like I think I played one song that we have, but other than that, everything was improvised, and we did it for about 2 hours, and it was super fun. And it's a real interesting exercise to kind of be in the moment and listening. I think when you're playing music, and obviously when you go to see live music, listening is the main part of it. But I think when you're performing music, listening is really key. I mean, if you're really dialed into what's going on and being able to focus in the moment, that's really key. And this was a real interesting exercise. That gig was a real interesting exercise because I had to go into that even further, where we were, creating a mood or creating a vibe, alternating. Like someone maybe, during the set, for instance, Ronnie would create this kind of space of where it would be, this real minimalist kind of ambient thing, or like something that has this, kind of hip hop flavor to it. So I want to try to take that vibe and introduce that as like a theme, and then maybe take it to a different place. And then we just kept doing that back and forth, and it was super, super cool. And I got that idea to do this kind of round robin thing after seeing a friend who I play music with play at this like singer songwriters showcase where there was a bunch of different acoustic folk artists, and they basically went down the line and they just played kind of off of each other to a degree, but then they would play these songs and then just move on to the next artist, and it was just kind of this. It was always rotating, and I thought that was really really cool, and I had never really seen that done in the context of electronic music. So that was kind of the idea of it. We did two. This was the second one that we did, and it was super fun. And I want to do another one definitely because it definitely works another part of my weird brain. So and it's something too where it's like that is always a part of our sound or of our music, and to a relatively small capacity or degree. But this exercise was like having to, really plunge myself into that mindset. And then we just last weekend we had our quantum show at the Camden Amphitheater in Camden, Maine, and that was super fun. We really lucked out with the weather. It was a beautiful day, and we played more of our sets. More of our music. We played a 2-hour set, and it was super fun. I love that gig so much. We've been doing that gig for almost 10 years, which is just crazy. And so we every summer, usually every August, we usually do it on a Sunday. This year we did it on a Saturday, but usually every Sunday or every summer, and it's always usually in August. We do like a 2-hour set in the Camden Amphitheater. It's a free show, and we play for about 2 hours, and we just do our thing, do our set. And it's such a beautiful space, and it's got amazing natural acoustics. I've had so many great and interesting experiences playing there. It's always different. It's very low key and kind of laid back. Like we don't. It's kind of set up as a concert, but yet I don't. I don't try. I try not to um, set it up in a way that it is a regular concert, if that makes sense. Because I want it to be like this thing of where it's very laid back, kind of in the background, but yet it's featured. So we just kind of handle it that way, and we usually approach it that way. And there's always a nice little crowd that always comes through there. There's a lot of people. It's summertime, so there's always people walking through there, and I love. That's one of my favorite gigs to do, and we always look forward to doing it every year. So that was fun, and that was this past Saturday. And then we have one more show on the books for our Quantum season of 2025. We're going to be playing at Blue in Portland in September with Osmia and the Button Men. So I'm very, very excited about that show. This will be our first time playing at Blue. So yeah, and yeah, I'm really thankful for how this year's been. It's been a really busy year for us as a band, and we played a lot of gigs, and I been writing a lot of new material, and then doing these shows and all that and all those things, and that's been really really fun. And I've always said too, like for me, it's like playing gigs. It's the ultimate kind of testing ground for material. So yeah, super fun summer with Quantum this year. And now to the movie at hand. So when I went to Bull Moose about 2 weeks ago, I finally got a movie that I'd never seen. And again, that's one of my big things now, and it has been for quite a while. Is I've been buying most of the movies I end up buying are movies I've never seen before, and so along with movies I grew up watching, but most of the movies I buy are things I've never seen before or that I heard about. And this movie today is a movie that I've heard so many things about, and in my travels never came across it. And I'd always heard so many wonderful things saying that this movie was, just such an iconic film and one of the first, one of the greatest and one of the earliest giallo films ever made, and that is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from legendary director Dario Argento. And again, I'm blown away because this came out in 1970, which is just fucking insane to me because just how like I never seen this movie. I'm a huge Dario Argento fan. Of course, he is probably when it comes to Italian horror directors and Italian directors in general, but especially when it comes to the world of horror, the most well known director. And I love his work. Of course, he's most well known for Suspiria, but he has so many incredible films to his name. I have a lot. I have quite a few of his films. Of, tons of his films on Blu-ray that I've accumulated. But this was a movie that I've been wanting to see, and I never saw it before, and then also wanting to buy it. And I got this Apple Moose. It was super cheap, and everything I'd heard about this movie, all of the praise and kind of the hype around this movie, is so spot on. Even more so, like this movie deserves even more praise than what I heard. And again, this movie, and again, the thing that's so unbelievable about this movie is how old it is, 1970, and it's so timeless. Like watching this for the first time, the transfer of this movie is on this Blu-ray edition is absolutely spectacular. It's the music was composed and performed by Ennio Morricone, who one of my favorite composers of all time. Of course, most well known for working on all kinds of spaghetti western classics. Um, yeah, just amazing. And so, a huge fan. And I didn't know that he did, working with Sergio Leone for so many years, and then he passed away a few years ago after winning the Academy Award for Best Soundtrack and Score for working with Quentin Tarantino on Hateful Eight, which is a Western and arguably, well, definitely one of my favorite Tarantino films, and it might be almost my favorite Tarantino film. And he went on a blaze of glory went out with a blaze of glory with that film. But this is amazing, and the transfer of this film is just absolutely incredible. This was put out by a label I've never really heard about before. Not by any known label that I know of, boutique label, but my God, the transfer of this is unbelievable. And again, this movie feels so fresh and new. It feels like it came out in 2025. And this is definitely one of the greatest giallo films I'd ever seen. I've heard so many things like in regards to giallo. The giallo style is like I saw like quite a few giallo films when I was a kid, and I was always enamored with those films. I saw a lot of these kinds of films, as a kid, like because the giallo film or the giallo style is often lumped in or clumped in with the horror exploitation world because it shares a lot of the same characteristics, and it's probably even mostly more closely aligned to the slasher genre. And there's a lot of slasher elements in a lot of these giallo films, and some would say films like Torso and things like that are slasher films, by Sergio Martino. And so, again, that's one thing I like to do is trace back the lineage of a certain style. So there's a lot of giallo films that have that element. But with this style, like, and I saw a lot of giallo films when I was a kid, but I didn't really know, like, I had never heard the term before, what giallo. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago when I first heard that term. I was like, what is giallo? Like, that's interesting because I kept hearing it being mentioned in different videos that I was watching on YouTube and different YouTube guys that I was like checking out, and I'm like, yeah, I've seen a lot of those films, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And so and realizing and learning a lot about the style of giallo, which was basically, or is basically kind of the Italian version of or rendition of kind of that classic Agatha Christie story, where giallos typically always have, the emphasis on the story is always a murder mystery film. Giallos are typically very, very dark, and there's always a murder mystery element. Giallo films are also really influenced by Alfred Hitchcock, so there's always a tremendous amount of suspense and dread. And there's always other tropes, where you have this gloved killer, and uh, there's always there's a killer or a murderer on the loose who is picking off these people one by one. And then there's usually like a lot of twists, and there's always like a surprise ending, and it's always, a lot of the times, it's the killer is always somebody you don't, always suspect, or you don't see coming. And that is, those typical tropes are, what kind of giallo films are all about. And I had heard so much about the bird with the crystal plumage for a really long time. And again, I've always loved Dario Argento, but I never seen this movie. And I'd heard this movie was kind of one of the greatest giallo films, one of those films, like, historically, when you look at giallo films, because you know um, this the genre has been around for so many years. And I had heard that this was like one of the movies that really kind of ushered in that style, because again, this is like 1970, and it's like, I mean, you can't really get too much more old school than that. And that this was like one of the, kind of the movies that really ushered in that style. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. It's wicked suspenseful. And again, I've said this before, but I think people out there who are new to the world of, real low budget, trashy cinema, exploitation movies, and they might not be into, lots of gore and, practical effects, or, high sexual content, and just violent films in general. But this movie, I think, could be a gateway, because it does. It is a very intense movie. It's obviously very violent and very low budget, very sleazy, but um, it's so suspenseful. It feels like you're watching a Hitchcock movie. It's just such a great it's such a great film, and it's basically centered on this character, this guy who is, at least he believes this is what's happening, but he's witness to this murder. And he's this witness to this woman who gets murdered. And he goes to the police with this information and acts as a witness, and then he is working with the police to kind of figure out what is happening. And he eventually gets targeted by the killer, because the killer does get free. And it's all about that story, and it's amazing. Like, and again, it feels like you're watching a classic Hitchcock movie. And the reason I say that this movie could be like that gateway movie for people who are new to exploitation movies and giallo films, is that this movie, again, it is very gory, or I should say, it's very violent, and it is very twisted. Um, but the emphasis is, with this film, is really put on the story and the suspense. And I think, if you're into, say you're a fan of The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, you would love this movie. And I think that this movie would be a great introduction to someone out there new to this style, whether it's giallo films or exploitation movies. It's kind of all the same thing for me. But the giallo style is a very interesting and distinct style. And I think that this movie could be that, could really get somebody who is, newly on board. This would really pique their interest to want to explore this amazing genre even more. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And it's again, you don't see. Like I just finished up watching the first two Alien movies, and I've talked about those movies so much and done shows on them, and in particularly the second one too. But it those films are all about kind of that slow burn, that slow build up, and where you don't really see the creature, the alien, the xenomorph, very much. And when you do see that creature, it's utterly terrifying. But there's so much build up, and there's no like um, big reveal, in the beginning of the film or even in the middle of the film. It's like this slow burn, and it's just like always they're Ridley Scott and James Cameron, like they're just continually adding more and more tension. And that to me is like kind of the epitome of this movie and just giallo films, is that you don't know who the killer is at all. And again, the ending for this film is absolutely fantastic. I was so incredibly surprised on who the killer was. I had no idea, and there was so much suspense around that. I had feelings at one or two points before I felt like I knew who the killer was, and to my surprise, I was completely wrong. But along the way with this film, I mean, Dario Argento is such a master filmmaker. It's like I think of the suspense level being like where you're taking a balloon and you're just, you're adding air to it, and you just keep, but you're doing it in small doses to where it feels like it's only going to take so much pressure and air before it pops, but it's that gradual, thing of ratcheting up the tension more and more and more. And that's the thing. And the characters are so great in this film. The acting, the cast is fantastic in this movie. Um, and again, I've always said, for me, the biggest selling point for a lot of these movies, or for all of these movies, really, in the exploitation giallo world, is if the movie has this, you know, I'm a big fan of world building, and if you're pulled into that world, and it creates this really rich atmosphere, even if the movie is, absolute trash, which I watch a lot of trash, but even if the movie in this case of where it's really like so trashy and terrible, whether it's bad acting or the editing is bad or what have you, or the story just doesn't make any sense. But if it has this atmosphere, this rich atmosphere to it that you can almost taste it, I'm probably gonna love that movie. I'm probably gonna be into it no matter what. And the Bird of the Crystal Plumage has that to the highest degree, but it also has an amazing cast, and it's a great script. It's so damn good. And I didn't know that the score was composed by Ennio Morricone, who's one of my favorite composers. Just incredible, just absolutely incredible. The transfer of this, I got this really cheap too. I've said before in previous videos that I don't buy as many movies as I used to because prices have gone up, which is sadly true. I mean, just everything in general has gone up to a point of to where it's kind of like ridiculous. So that's caused me, because of the prices and stuff, and a lot of boutique labels, because of just the expenses of everything. That's obviously the prices for a lot of movies have gone up, and I was worried about it. And I had heard rumors that the prices were going up, and I hadn't bought any movies for a while. And then I went to a couple of shops, and I saw like, wow, like prices have gone up. But when I went to Blue Moose this last time, they had such the most incredible selection I've ever seen. Like just I felt like I got through half of the movies that they had, and the other half I didn't even get through because I already found so many amazing movies. And I'm like, if I was a rich man, I would buy this entire fucking place up. But I found some really good ones that were really cheap. And the Bird of the Crystal Plumage, this Blu-ray, was super cheap. It was like $6, and the only downside to it is there's no, which I didn't realize I was a little bit disappointed with. There's no special features on here, but my God, the transfer and just this movie being such a masterpiece in its own right, it doesn't matter. It's worth buying, and this is essential. This is an essential movie for people who are into horror and slasher films, exploitation movies, and if you're a Dario Argento fan, this is like unbelievable. It's so goddamn good. I can't recommend this movie enough, and I'm so excited that I finally got this movie. Yeah, and it's just amazing. Definitely one of his best movies, I think, that I've seen. And when I watched this the other night and I finished it, I was like, because I really love the Giallo style tremendously, and I was like, this might be the greatest Giallo film I've seen. But again, it's really hard to say. I think I'm gonna do. I mentioned earlier in the show I'm gonna do because I've done a big. I've done a couple of big shows on the channel where I did a show last year on my favorite top, I don't know, I think more or less my top 20 or top 30 exploitation movies. And I did a show on that. And then I think I did a show on my top 20 or so slasher films. And then I also did a show on my entire collection of movies that I have. But two of the ideas I'm thinking of doing, because I've gotten quite a few, is doing a show on just my favorite slasher movies of all time, like a part two, because I think I have a part one, and I've gotten a lot more slasher films lately, or over the past year. So I'm thinking of doing a big show on new slasher films and um, that I've gotten, and talking about a lot of the new purchases, but then also obviously incorporating the older ones that have always been on my top list. So I'm thinking about doing a part two for my all-time slasher films, and because I got a lot more, and then I'm thinking of doing a show on my Giallo collection because I have a lot of Giallo films now, and this is kind of the inspiration for it. So we'll see. That might be some future shows that I'll do, and they'll be bigger shows, obviously. So yeah, but I can't recommend The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. This movie is the bomb diggity. 1970, and it's just like holy shit, unbelievable. And again, I got this really cheap, and it's so, you know, again, a place like Bull Moose, especially the one in Waterville, each Bull Moose is very different from each other, which is really cool, I think. You know, they have such an unbelievable selection of films that if you search around, you can find things pretty cheap still. And it's not, as far as me buying movies, like, yeah, I'll be buying probably a little bit less movies, but it's not going to deter me from buying them, of course. No way. So, yeah, definitely check this movie out if you've never seen it, and definitely add this to your collection. It's a masterpiece. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.